Day 201 of a screenwriter's journey. This is a long day, so we'll see how much of the voiceover I get to today. I've been doing some voice kind of breathing exercises to make my voice not so nasally after an extended period of time, or just in general. My voice has never been that great, especially sitting down. So this scene I was working on yesterday, and I sometimes you can fall in love with your dialogue, and next thing you know, a scene is lasting, 4, 5, 6 pages. I don't know that this lasts that long, but in this sort of movie, I better not say, I wouldn't think a scene should last more than 3 pages. Obviously, a minute a page, we all know that. But, when you, especially, this is basically page 83. And so, as I've said, this is really into the third act, based on this being like 100 to 105 pages long. And I've thought that maybe I shouldn't make it that long. But then you think, can you just artificially or arbitrarily say, I'm going to write a 90-page script? I don't know. I guess you could, either if you were really good or you didn't care, or you just massage the structure to fit the length. Obviously, TV writers have to do that on network TVs when their shows are either run, 21 and a half minutes or 42 minutes and 18 seconds or something. They have a little bit of wiggle room, but pretty much they need to be within 30 seconds or less, whereas screenplays, movies obviously do not. But having said that, I definitely don't want to make this a 120-page script. But I don't know that, this may sound pretentious, I don't know that I could do it justice by making it a 90-page script. The point is, if it's going to be 100, 105 pages, by this time, this shouldn't be happening. And I've said this to myself before. Cut, 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 cut. Talk, 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 talk. Cut the talk. So, having said that, sometimes, and this certainly, I'm not going to pretend this is a first draft, but when you're writing new stuff or you're trying to figure something out, I would say inevitably it takes a lot longer to get there than you want it to. And what I mean by that is it takes a lot more pages to get to your final page count, and it takes a lot more time going through them, because you really do have to distill what you want to say, keeping in mind that, of course, every line has to either reveal character, it has to advance the plot, it has to do any number of things. And if it can do 2 things, then that's even better. And when you consider what a daunting task that is, there's no surprise, at least for me, it takes several times through. And I've said before, I'm sure there's no script I've written where the first time through, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, I may think that sometimes, but then I go back through it again and again and again, and I hopefully make it better. But sometimes some scenes, I would say, take longer to get to that point. Whether, if you've got 5 different 2-page scenes, one of them you may roughly get the first time and you may hone it down, and it may take you 3 or 4 passes. Other times, as I've proved at least to myself in this script, I'm sure there's scenes that I've worked on, 10 plus times. And usually that's a sign that something's not working right. And I guess I should realize that. And someday I'll go back and watch this whole thing and then say, oh my gosh, I worked on that for how many days? Because it's pretty crazy when I do this and look back and see what I'm working on. So now we've jumped back to page 60. Interesting. I kind of lost track of what I was writing there. So now my question has been to myself, do I bring, gosh, excuse me, do I really bring Paul back in as someone who I had in mind for a long time that Holly was going to contact him. He was going to tell her what had happened. He was going to jump on a plane and come out and try to save the day. And in the process, maybe get killed or something bad happens to him. And so I thought, because of this approximately 3 hours it takes to fly via private jet, although I need to look that up. I mean, it's 900 miles. I need to look that up again because I could certainly, that's one thing that I've had a problem with is just that time frame. So I could move the city. I could make it, St. Louis, or I could make it anywhere. And I could reduce that time to an hour, but I don't really want to do that. So I guess now that Hogan is sort of in place, he's come in earlier, quite a bit earlier than before. I'd have to look back and see, certainly before the midpoint, somewhere in the fun and games. And so not that he and Paul are by any means the same character or necessarily serve the same purpose, but does Hogan sort of take over for Paul? Can I have it such that Paul delivers this news to her, and then when he finds out what's going on, aka that Holly is doing this kind of on a rogue operation, that he just says, sorry, honey, not that he would call her that, and just we never see him again. So I need to think about that. I mean, just thinking out loud, I guess he sort of did that. No, in the previous version, he lived in the general area. Because what I'm thinking is he could still come in sort of after the fact and put a bow on it and stuff. He wouldn't really serve the same mentor purpose, that the mentor that dies or lets someone down. But I think he could still do that. Kind of teach her a lesson or scold her, because he's kind of in the bad guy's clothes in, and he's not literally a bad guy, of course, but I think that could work. So the question is, having said all that, I'm still debating as I write here on page 60 on February 19th, do I have him jump on the plane and say, all right, let's give it the old college try. But then, it would be super convenient if, there's a jet waiting to take you, Mr. Paul, or whatever his last name is. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And so I'm trying to turn this into kind of more of a scolding thing where he is, wants to open her eyes to the fact that, hey, you kind of screwed the pooch on this one, and I'm not going to ride in on my white horse and save the day, which I don't really expect. She expects he would, or the audience wouldn't. And so now we've got Holly hanging up on him, basically. And so look at that. I didn't think it was that long ago, but I basically have written him out of the rest of the story, at least short term, in terms of getting there in time to help. So now, again, it's just, there's too much talking. There's too much dialogue. It's got to go faster. And I'm not going to give you a spoiler as to whether I've fixed this problem in present day, because that wouldn't be any fun. For about 20 minutes, they drove us. So now, okay, so this is the middle of a phone call to Paul. Holly gets a call from Rachel, and who, of course, is putting on this show about they've been taken. She's landed. She gives her a recap of the helicopter ride. She pretends, or maybe she doesn't know about putting a pin, dropping a pin, sending the location. But the problem is, and I'm flipping back and forth here too fast to really count the pages, but I feel like for sure this whole thing of Holly talking to Paul and then to Rachel and then back to Paul again has got to be 4 pages. And that, what I'm working on right now, what Paul tells her, that's sort of what I got from the deputy U.S. Marshal, that they've got no warrant for, Rachel's out of the system. They have no warrant. They have no reason, official legal reason that they can go after Salerno, Nick, or whatever her ex's name is. They certainly could mobilize. If he leaves the state, I mean, they could, but I don't think Paul couldn't just snap his fingers and muster a big contingent of people to go after him. And I don't think Holly could call into her office and do that, because at that point, he's not really under their jurisdiction, and certainly she's not going to make a phone call and get the FBI involved or anything. So she's definitely in a pickle, and so that's kind of looks like what I'm rewriting, even though I just did some rewriting. We win by following protocols, not by throwing here and there. So now I mean, that's one of those lines that isn't that bad, even though I just deleted it. There's so many, that you say, oh, that's a great line, which means it sticks out, which means it probably shouldn't be in the script. But at the same time, you can't just have a bunch of, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm doing good. What's the weather today? So there is definitely a fine line between writing those cliched catchphrases or those sound bites that are going to be in the trailer, and then, realistic dialogue without it being boring. So it's pretty, and you hear those all the time, and I guess it's partly how they're delivered, and maybe you expect them and all that kind of stuff. So I guess ongoing battle. And as I'm talking, I'm reflecting on the trailers that I edited for the 3 movies I've made, which I've spoken about once or twice. And it'd be interesting but impossible for me to go back in time and think of when I was writing those scripts and I got to the dialogue that later became part of the trailer if I thought to myself while writing the script, ooh, this would make a good trailer soundbite. I highly doubt it. I'm just thinking of those. But, I mean, that was A, it was a long time ago, and B, it would be kind of a fruitless effort, but it would be interesting. All right, so we're still talking here. Paul is trying to convince Holly to get her people involved. And I did want to bring in that element of Paul warning her, 12 years ago, this is exactly why you don't get involved in a case like this, because you get too invested in it emotionally and etc. Having said that, it looks like I'm about to delete that line. So I'm trying to rework that. As I said, yeah, he would never say that. So I guess that's one of those things where Paul gives his line and she goes, watch me. And then there's like a dramatic close-up of her. And the problem is you can't slam down the phone. In fact, in one of speaking of my previous scripts, I had a kind of a comic scene where a guy's talking on his cell phone and he ends a conversation. He wants to slam down the phone and he can't because you don't slam down phones. So he just punches the disconnect button really hard, and I think it maybe sort of paid off on screen, but not exactly. It does when you think about that. The emotion and what you could say from a character slamming the phone into the cradle, and now they can swipe or punch or whatever to disconnect the call, but it certainly doesn't have the physical and big response. So I guess they could throw the phone down, they could drop the phone, they could do it with their expression or something like that. But it is funny how technology, or it may not be technology, just changing times, changes the way that you write. And I've mentioned it before. So many phone calls, and I keep saying I'm going to do some research on the number of phone calls or texts, even now, of course, that are in movies versus real conversations in person. Because I do feel like I have a lot of phone calls. My first movie, We No Care, it didn't have that many phone calls, but I think they were telephones. I mean, like the very first scene was a telephone. My second movie, getting off the topic, that had fair amount of phone calls. In the third movie, I guess not. Well, it did have at least one real phone. I don't know why I'm getting off on that tangent. I guess because I've got 40 minutes to talk here and not quite halfway through. And today is the semifinals of the NCAA men's basketball. So Duke and North Carolina are probably in the first half right now. But I'm out of my bracket. I've lost. I think I'm going to get fourth place. All right, let's see here. I'm going to find them. We're going to find them. I hope that includes us. We can wait for us for drivers. So, excuse me. I'm ahead of page 60, obviously, but way back from page 84 I was at the other day, or even, was that the beginning of today? It's all blending together on day 201. So they've got the quad bike. They went out. They found the print, not the prints, the footprints of they found the skid marks, so to speak, impressions in the grass, so they know a helicopter's come and gone. And if you get back to my Jeep by the time we're done packing, you can ride along. See, that's kind of a lame thing. I do like the cut, though, packing one, and then we cut to the safe, and Hogan is unloading these guns and stuff. I still don't know if I've established that he was the Army Ranger. I'm thinking of my present day writing, and I just realized that I may need to fix that up. But I don't know that, in the first one, it came out as he and Holly were riding around, and they had a nice discussion about it, which I think worked pretty well. That hasn't happened because, it's completely different how they met and everything. So, but anyways, I'm on page 63. The bad guys closing in, you could consider them being kidnapped. You could even consider Paul not coming to help her or saying he's not. That's not literally bad guys close in, but it's a bad thing happening. So I think it could qualify. I don't know if this firepower would be justified. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, it's barely 9. It's not even 9 o'clock. So, I do want to have some bang bang guns in here, and of course bulletproof vests. So I think I have to keep that, but I don't know if it's too dramatic. If I shouldn't make that big of a deal out of it. And again, when Holly says 30 rounds each, that signifies to the audience and Hogan that she knows how many rounds these Colt M4 carbine rifles hold. Because I did some research. But so they get there. Oh my goodness. One more yawn, Jack, and you're out. Just kidding. So I'm just looking at this. This is like virgin writing. Well, maybe it's not. So this is the point again where how much do we drag out? It's not royal. We drag out the fact that, well, maybe Abby and Luke won't go with her. Maybe they'll stay there, or they'll drive home, or they'll like sneak after her or something. So I'm working at, although you can't really see it here, I'm trying to work out a way where they're invested obviously in the story, and Abby or in Lexi and Jake, but to make it more so they're an integral part. And Holly obviously wants to keep them out of danger, but I really have to get them to the point where the audience is rooting for it to happen. But when it happens, they're like, oh, she wouldn't bring those guys along. And so that's what I'm working on. Don't know if it's going to work. All right, so now we're in another cabin, and I've talked a little bit about the possibility that, do I really want this other cabin, even though it's a different cabin, different location? Do we feel like we're going back and spinning our wheels? We're not really advancing, even though we're somewhere 40, 50 minutes away, or I should say miles instead of minutes. So this scene, I'm just keeping track, starts on the top of 65. Because that original trampoline park in the first version, again, that was Luke and Lexi, but that they got up and then they looked around, they ate, and then they came back and they jumped and stuff. And that was a pretty long scene. So I definitely, we haven't seen these guys for 7, 8, 9 pages. I don't know how long it's been. So it's a thing where we're certainly not getting reintroduced to them, but they've been unconscious the whole time, so we don't need to know what they've been doing because we have seen them, or at least we know what's happened to them or have a pretty good idea. And so then the question of what do you do when you get up, you're in this new cabin, you're not tied up, but how quick do you go and check the doors? How quick do you get on your phone? Do you have a phone, et cetera, et cetera? How desperate do they get running all over the place, knocking on the doors, trying to break through the windows, and then, oh, we can't break through the windows because they're all barred up, or they've got cardboard, they've got plywood on them. But then why would these cabins have plywood on them? And I kind of thought of that while I was writing this. But then I kind of shied away from it, frankly. Because I guess if they did have bars on them, which would be stupid, because these are vacation cabins, you could break the glass, but you couldn't get out, but that would be stupid. So having plywood over them would make more sense. Maybe it's being repaired. Maybe this cabin is old and out of commission, and so they boarded it up for whatever reason. So it's not totally beyond question that this could happen, but then you have to ask yourself, is it worth having to set all that stuff up and explain it and everything? So they're recapping. So this is tricky because they need to know, well, Jake kind of needs to know what happened, what's going on. But since the audience basically knows, you really got to get through that fast. So they have the montage of going around the cabin. They can't get out, can't get out, can't get out. So again, this sequence, this scene, even though this isn't all one scene, because we did have that montage or series of shots, it's lasted 3 pages so far. And then this is, I think, the part where Lexi says it's all my fault. That goes to her insecurity and her, again, not fragileness, but just she is too willing to jump to the conclusion that anything that bad happens is her fault. She may have thought that growing up, and that's why the foster parents, turned her back into the group home and back into the system and stuff. So now we're back here, and this is the first time that Rachel has talked to him, and she's quickly going to start trying to convince them that it is indeed Holly behind all this. And of course, she's just totally manipulating you, poor girl. As I go through this, I'm doing it more and more, but I really need to make sure my last pass as I get in this, that really everything Rachel says to anyone is manipulation of some sort, whether it's Holly or obviously Lexi, or even if it's Ace and Clyde. What she's always, feeding people lines. So she leaves, and then Jake and Lexi basically, they don't really recap what she said, but they do in a way. Jake trying to determine if there's any possibility that Lexi could believe that Holly would turn on her. And I like that line, the U.S. Marshal Service couldn't pay her enough for the work she does. Maybe he can. That is really... It's not too cutesy, but it says a lot, and I think it's something that would be realistic enough that would plant the seed of doubt in her mind that she's kind of thinking on her feet, as all your characters should, if they're, reading the lines right and saying them in the movie. It's not like, oh, here's my line I'm going to say now, and then they rattle it off. So... I don't know that Lexi would have ever even considered that, growing up and stuff. Probably not. But the question is, with the seeds of doubt that Rachel has planted, can the audience be made to believe that Lexi could doubt the situation enough, and maybe doubt Holly enough, that she would realistically say, oh, wow, Holly, maybe she is doing this for the money or whatever. And so I kind of like that. I think it can work, but then how long does it take to get to that point? 99, mid-90s, she looked after me. I highly doubt she'd sell me down the river. Don't you dare. So Rachel's playing the game. She's outside, and maybe she's got her ear pressed up to the door for all we know. But, of course, Lexi doesn't know that, and Jake doesn't know that. And so that's another thing that I've been playing with is... there's it's not school of thought, it's a method that I've talked about before, where the audience knows exactly as much as one character. And it's basically almost a first person, like a novel where the author uses I as the main character and sort of as the reader. And then the reader sees the entire novel, experiences it in real time, with the character, the I character. That usually isn't the case in movies, because you're cutting to scenes that the character isn't in, so things are happening that obviously he is not aware of or she is not aware of. So then the challenge becomes catching that character up on things that the audience already knows. So every time you cut to a scene where the audience already knows what's happened, then how do you convey that message to the characters or how do you catch the characters up on the story without, rehashing something the audience knows already. So that's, that can be tricky. And I know I'm speaking as someone who's written for a long time. In my early scripts, I obviously sucked at it, and I read a lot of scripts. I don't read a lot recently because I've been busy writing this one. But you do read a lot of scripts where it's just talking about stuff that the audience already knows, and one character is catching the other character up on it, and that's no good at all, and something you certainly have to guard against. And you just, I guess, sort of learn tricks about how to phrase dialogue such that things come out in it that the audience knows, but the characters may be talking about something else. But in that dialogue, you also come to realize that, oh yeah, they already know something that the audience already knows. If that made any sense. So now I've got this Cecilia, or Sicily, I don't even know how I pronounce that. And again, I said, do I want a new character to be introduced at page 73 or 72, whenever she got introduced? And so the reason I did is she knows Hogan's parents, and then that could relate to her that, oh, this is Hogan's, even though I don't know him, this is his girlfriend, and it could be sort of an awkward situation. But look at all the time that took to do How Are Your Parents Doing since they're retired. So, it brings us some more information about Hogan. But again, is it worth it this late in the script? Does she really belong here? Okay, so Abby, let's see how much I'm going to change this scene. So, being the conspiracy theorist, it gives me the latitude sort of to have him ask a bunch of questions that maybe the audience is asking. And that's, now that I think about it, wow, Jack, I just literally thought about this. Day 02, 201. Well, not really. I was going to say he is sort of the audience, the guy who asks the questions the audience would if they were in the scene. I guess I could consider him that way. That's an interesting thought. But it wouldn't be out of his character to do that. So that is kind of a convenient thing. I don't know that I'm going to roll with that idea. I did just think about it, and it is kind of interesting to think about. But so he sort of asks the questions and says things that can keep the ball rolling. And I don't know if that's accurate now that I say that, but it's an option. Worst case, she's a jerk. Oh my gosh, what the heck? I'm back on page 44. What the deuce? As Stewie says, I think, on Family Matters. Family Matters. Family Ties? Family... All in the Family? No, Family Guy. Family Guy. Oh my gosh. So, I don't know what I did back on page 45 for a minute. So now Cecilia is giving them information about Clyde and or Ace. But just the whole idea that they've come in here, they've rented these cabins, they're going to just cool their jets. I just don't know. Cool their jets waiting for the jet. That's pretty clever. I don't know that that's going to cut it. How dumb sounds in a trade place. Yeah. When a character says something like that, how dumb does it sound? That's a sign that the writer is like groping for dialogue, because it's kind of it's not breaking the fourth wall, but it's kind of knocking on it at least. So I got rid of it. So I guess the moral of this story in this scene is I don't really know what Luke's going to talk about. He's being suspicious. He's being skeptical. And again, maybe he is sort of saying things that the audience may be thinking. So at least in this scene, that could be really his purpose or his purpose. So he's just basically, thinking out loud and maybe saying what some people in the audience are wondering. But again, he's recapping things that we've already seen, and so has the audience drawn different conclusions? If so, will this not register with them, or won't, or maybe it won't ring true, or maybe they'll say, "Well, Luke, shut up because you don't know what you're talking about." All the time. And then I do like this idea of Abby going back to the tin hats thing, and then something happens later where it's like, "Oh, I better put on mine now," or Luke says, "Here's my tin hat, you might want to borrow it," or something. But the other thing you can do, which I've done in this, is Abby says her line, but then Luke just literally ignores it, and he's just continuing on with his thought. And then she says her second line, and there's really no response to it because the Jeep doors open and Holly and Hogan return. So when in doubt, as I've said, have the phone ring, have a gun go off, have a door slam, or someone appear who has been motivated to appear, probably, or at least hinted at, and then it can take a whole different direction. Or you can just cut to something else. So now Holly's telling them they've got to wait in the nature center place. But Luke wants to ask her a question, which apparently I can't think of because, there's the cursor moving again. Oopsie. There's another yawn. Why are they the only person who holds? This is kind of a key point. And so again, is this what the audience is wondering? Because Luke heard the conversation with Paul and kind of got a sense of what's going on. Obviously the others did too, but Luke has pretty much spent this whole time thinking about it because that's kind of how he's wired. And so I like this line of thought that he's, I like, obviously I say it's so funny how I say it as if I wasn't the one who wrote the dialogue, but I can see what I'm doing here, and I saw it at the time, and he kind of wants to put this question to bed of, hey, is anyone coming? Is what I've heard, can you validate what I've heard by explaining things or just by admitting to what's going on? So I guess the question is, if just hypothetically speaking, if I completely rewrote this section and took out the part about them coming to the second set of cabins, what happens to all this beautiful dialogue? He said with a twinkle in his eye. And so Holly can't really, for reasons of a structural nature and the script writing nature, she can't literally just sit there answering the question or giving him a big long explanation. And so she puts it off under the guise, and it's not really a guise because it's a valid reason that, hey, look, Lexi and your brother are out there. We don't know if they're okay. As soon as they're safe, I'll tell all. And then, well, I just got rid of Luke's retort there. And so she gives them the choice. Do you want me to sit here and yak and explain everything, or do you want us to try to save your brother and Lexi? Because right now, there's only time for one. So I guess I covered a fair amount of material while writing and in my recap here. And this has been 40 minutes. I hope my voice hasn't deteriorated too much. Making some good progress, not completely sold on everything, but hey, that's what happens at the Five and Dime. See ya.